thanks very much, Shibley, for inviting me. It's very exciting to be here with the eclectic mix, and it's a wonderful mixture of different organisations, different approaches, different people presenting, as always, when it's about Shibley's multi-perspective approach on dementia. So I'm really pleased to be able to do one of my soapboxes coming from the psychology perspective. And the one I wanted to talk to you a bit about today is about psychological therapies, early stages of dementia, and excess disability. So something a bit about why would we do therapy? So a little bit about the prevalence and the evidence that we've got around that. I'm, apart from a clinical psychologist, I'm also a clinical neuropsychologist, so there's something about what can we learn from neuropsychology, and put that in a context of stress and vulnerability, and then try and end up with something about how on earth are we going to provide any of this in the future. And hopefully that fits in general in how do we organise care in order for people to be able to live well. So just to kind of pop back there for a second, I've put you some of my various icons and on there, and that's because apart from working for the NHS, 4.5 days a week. I also work half a day a week for the British Psychological Society, so I'm chair at the moment of the Faculty of Psychology of Older People, and by virtue of being there, I'm also part of the Division of Clinical Psychology's Executive Committee. And because of my kind of long-standing interest in all things dementia, I'm also representing BPS on the Dementia Action Alliance, and I'm involved on the board there alongside Dawn, who's just left. Right, so try and squeeze that into the time that we've got. By way of introduction, so in healthy people without dementia, we know quite well that anxiety and depression affect our cognitive functioning. If we are frightened, if we're in a panic, if we are anxious, we are not terribly good at processing information, and we're not very good at remembering or at new learning. Likewise, if we are deeply depressed, our cognitive processes are being slowed down, and equally we see the world through a dark filter and aren't going to process information as well. In particular, executive functioning, the whole huge area of executive functioning is one of the ones that is most affected. So processing speed is particularly slow when you look at depression. Processing capacity is reduced. If we think about anxiety, we become quite focused and tunnel-visioned on finding danger and threat. Our judgment is going to be influenced by those kinds of filters that we might be processing the world and our experience through. Our reasoning, our attention will be distracted, not working as well, and our planning and organising is going to be affected. Likewise, new learning, delayed memory, later on remembering what exactly went on, all of that is going to be much poorer than it would otherwise be. It might not be thought about so much, but our visual spatial processing is also affected both by depression and by anxiety, and so is perception. So that the aspects of even visual perceptions that we see around us that we're going to be able to process or see later on is affected by being depressed or anxious. And if that's quite easy for everyone to imagine what it is like and what our thinking and our cognition is like when we're anxious or depressed, how much more difficult is that when a brain is struggling with the effects of one of the various dementias? So that the effects of anxiety and depression are quite heightened in people with cognitive disabilities due to neurological problems. So therefore, it shouldn't be such a surprise that what we try to work towards is reducing the excess disability that comes from experiencing depression and anxiety down to a level where what you are left with, if you have to live with dementia and cognitive impairment, is really only that comes from the neurological impairment, and that you get rid of the interactions between those. And where would you look for ways of doing that? Well, let's see. Well, psychologists have been doing psychological therapy for near on a century or so, that would be one place to look. And then if we think about what we have learned from psychologists working in intellectual disability, like Peter Mittler, who some of you know, and who works on human rights, so intellectual disability, neuropsychology, acquired brain injury. Now, in acquired brain injury, there's money in rehabilitating people because they tend to be younger, they tend to come with big insurance payouts, quite often, not always, but they tend to come with big insurance payouts that pay, and with an interest of the other party that's going to have to pay long term for their disabilities, in rehabilitating people up to the best possible level they can get to, because that will reduce their pain for the rest of their lives. Okay, so there is work happening that is not happening in dementia care at the moment. And then, just if we haven't got enough reason from that why we should develop support and employ more psychological therapies, then more reasons why that's an important step to take. We know the most feared condition in people over 50, if you do surveys, is developing dementia. Great money spinner for some of the charities that want to go out to chief executives who tend to be around about that kind of age and promise them cures in 5 to 10 years, 4 years apparently now. Anyway, so if they just cough up enough money, then they might be spared this sort of thing that they are most afraid of. And let's face it, dementia is a very existential threat to the self, especially in a world that is very intellectually based, where intellect is being prized above emotion and where doing is prized above being. Then there are the systems effects of families. It's not just the person with dementia that has to live with it, it's also everybody else in their environment. If you can address excess disability in the person with dementia, then you would be able to address the effects that anxiety and depression have on carers, on relatives, and families, on systems, and so forth. And one of the things we do know about mental health type difficulties in people with dementia is that when you ask carers, the greatest burden very often comes from the person that they're caring for being depressed, rather than the extent of their cognitive difficulties. There's the uncertainty of prognosis and progression of different dementias. That is a very stressful thing to live with. If we know what we are facing, we can adjust. If we forever have to adjust to the latest thing and it's an amorphous thing in the future, that's much harder to do. Dementia activates lifelong disabilities in a whole host of different ways that I don't have time to get into. But one of the things that dementia does do is it causes chronic daily stress. It's a constant stressor of things going wrong. And we all have the examples of where we've forgotten where we left the car in the car park, or which car park I left it when I went to catch the train in the morning in a hurry, or we can't find our car key, or we can't find our passport at the airport, all those kinds of things. So that kind of experience, if you have that several times a day, that makes for a very stressful life. It undermines people's lifelong coping styles, so things that are established and work well, that have managed the most difficult aspects of one's personal approach to the world, possibly for a lifetime, those sorts of things start crumbling just at the time when you might need them most. We know that the best way of improving well-being in dementia is reducing levels of depression. That's not rocket science. As well as improving cognitive functioning directly. Right, I think that's quite enough of those. Now, so I'm always in awe of Shibley's academic approach to his subjects and his thoroughness and dedication to that. I'm a practitioner, essentially, and at heart, I'm a reflective scientist practitioner, is what clinical psychologists are, really. You know, when they apply for their courses and things, they have to demonstrate that that's what they do. And I suppose you do that in different components. And yes, absolutely, I go back to the evidence base, but I do base a lot of what I do on my practice first and foremost. Anyway, here we go to the data and to the literature. And there is a very surprising lack of data. What do we actually know about how many people who have dementia experience significant anxiety or do significant levels of depression? And when you start looking at it, the data's rubbish. So when you look at depression, somewhere between 20 and 40% maybe, thereabouts roughly, but then actually we don't know about people early. Oh my word, 5 minutes. Right, okay. So we don't really know. And what we particularly don't know is in early stages of dementia, there are care home studies that tell us stuff, but actually the large number of people with early stage dementia that have been diagnosed over the last 5 to 10 years in the process of driving up diagnosis rates and getting diagnoses early, we have no idea what the numbers actually are. I'm happy to share the slides so you can all look through the evidence base for all sorts of other approaches to therapy in dementia. I suppose one of my slightly provocative slides for my medical colleagues is always to say that psychological therapy is about treatment, and treatment is not just drugs. There's a name. I'm sure it won't sound like that when I do it at the Royal College of GPs. So, if we compare the knowledge and the progress that we've gained from the amount of money that has gone into biomedical research of bits of proteins and genetics over the last 10 years, is that proportionate to the expense when we're looking at what the progress in psychological therapies has been over the last few years? Because the recent new treatments in dementia have been psychological. There's CST that at least is up there with the evidence base, and so will be cognitive rehabilitation next. The reason we haven't got to that for other psychological therapies is that they are ridiculously hard to research. Not that it's impossible, but that if you want to do it well and to a nice, worthy standard, that is horrendously expensive. Just as expensive, let's face it, than some of the biomedical research, not much more expensive than that by any means, but it isn't possible to do it on the pitiful amounts of money that go into psychosocial research at the moment. Go on, is it? Move. Is it frozen? No, it goes backwards, but not there. Right. Another thing that, of course, as a psychology lead, kind of nationally is important for me is that we're constantly accused of being very expensive. And it is quite true that we're more expensive than nurses or even occupational therapists, but then that is also because psychologists train to a doctorate level, and if you compare us with other doctors, we are ridiculously cheap. And there is, of course, a great many people do wonderful therapeutic work in all sorts of different ways with people with dementia and are applying psychological principles extremely well and to very good effect. However, somewhere in there is a place for the highly trained, highly specialist types of people who are able to pick and choose from different schools and different types of psychological therapies and apply the right one at the right time to the right person, and be able to combine that with what we know about the particular profiles of difficulties that people with different kinds of dementia are experiencing. And just to maybe, if I can finish off with what I tried to put together some of the kind of key things that people with dementia have taught me over the years. And and if we I suppose if you're an experienced therapist and you have met hundreds of people with dementia and worked with them in a therapeutic way, you develop a database of your own, and it's called clinical judgment, and you'll have some commonalities there that help you make those complex matrix type decisions about what works for whom. So there are things about Alzheimer's disease that are very typical, all apart from the fact that then everybody is very different from each other. Something about Alzheimer's disease that's I can't remember any of the facts of what went on, but I do remember how it made me feel. And there are good neurological correlates to why it would be like that, about the hippocampus not working so well as the amygdala, and processing happening in the brain in different pathways. With a vascular dementia, it's the disconnection of different systems that may or may not work, and the uncertainty of whether it will or whether it won't. That when I sleep on it, when I wait for a while, it might actually work later if I calm down enough. And Lewy body dementia, that people live with this sense that things work extremely well some of the time, and they go on swimmingly, and then something happens that's quite undefinable, and the whole world has changed, and there's the hallucinations and the kind of trying to make sense again from a completely new point from where we are. And frontotemporal dementia is a particular, I'll finish with the frontotemporal dementia, because when you read the textbooks, when you go online and read about frontotemporal dementia, it's devastating what you read there, and it's the particular impression that people lose everything to do with human empathy and with their emotions. And in my experience, that's not actually true, and there are ways of talking with people about that, and there are ways of assisting people to live with it. Things like that I don't seem to care like I used to. Sometimes I think I can't love anymore. That describes very well what people with frontotemporal dementia go through, and if you look and compare that with the textbooks, it gives you a very different perspective to do that kind of work. And the behavioural disinhibition that people say, well, I really don't notice at the time, I can't see anything wrong with what I do, I only understand it later when people explain it to me. So all of those, there are ways of working with those therapeutically, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.